All right.
Okay,
I'm going to
perfect.
try to
Yeah.
go about 45 minutes and then leave the rest of the time open for questions at the end. If I start going really, really long, all of you people that are on screen, you're my accountability. Just start waving your hands. Like, stop, no more. And then I'll know that I need to stop. Because there's a good possibility that I'll just get carried away and I'll talk for 2 hours and you guys don't want to hear me for 2 hours, I promise. You don't. So, but that's the idea is I'm going to go about 45 minutes and then we'll have some questions. I want to make this as practical as possible, but I feel like a topic like this, you have to really start with the theoretical, which is kind of the research behind things, because at this point, if I just tell you all of my ideas, those are just opinions. There's been a lot of research done on feedback. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to push through that pretty quickly. But I'm also going to, on slide 9, I'll just show you. I have a whole set of links that you guys can take a look at so you can look at the feedback a little more in depth. We'll go all the way there. All right, it looks a little bit like this screen. And so Dinah is going to post the PowerPoint, a link to the PowerPoint. So if you want to open it into in a separate tab, then you can do that. Feel free to kind of just go wherever on the PowerPoint you want to go. Maybe it's a little bit too small and it's difficult to read, then you can have it open on another tab and maximize it so you can see everything. So Dinah, can you post that link?
Yes, I'm doing that right now. Both of them? Both of them
No, just
right
go
now?
ahead and post that first one. I'll post the other one a little bit later. I'll let
Okay.
you know when. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
So a little bit of an introduction to who I am. I work with the University of North Florida as an English instructor. I've been online for about 2 years now. And let me think. It was 2019, but early 2019. I moved to Peru and was based out of Arequipa, Peru for a while, and that's how I got to know Jota. And I work with Jota at Change. So you guys saw Jota, I think, if you went to that main conference. And so what I do with them is I'm an instructional designer for ESP, and I tutor a little bit. So I work with English students. I teach them English. I build content. And then with University of North Florida, I've been online even before the pandemic. So everybody's online now. But I was doing it for a while before, and I've kind of merged those things in this presentation. So I'm specifically talking about writing during this time because it's such a difficult thing to teach someone how to write. I think I remember when I first started tutoring, I'd have these one-on-one students, and usually I would teach professionals, and they would bring in an email into class, and they would say, I really, really need help with writing. Can you help me with this? And I remember having this feeling of like, I'm a writing instructor. I should know how to teach you this. But like have it, that deer in the headlights look when you're like, I don't really know where to start. Like, what do I do? Do I go through and correct their email? Or do I try to teach them this kind of systematically? And after that happens time and time again, that's where this idea kind of came out of. How do you go about teaching someone whose English is their second language? It can feel overwhelming. And so that's kind of the idea behind this. This is my very way oversimplified process of teaching writing. I just wanted to give it to you from the beginning. Step 1, you have to introduce a concept or some concepts. You start writing right away, you give feedback, you rewrite, you repeat that step. Today, we're just going to be focusing on feedback. I'm going to hint at some of the other things. We're going to talk about them, but we have 45 minutes together. We don't have time to do the entire writing process. So really what I want to do is I want to give you an idea of feedback and how to go about that process. I think other than the actual process of writing, this is the most important part of the writing process, is you giving feedback, because it's so hard to do well. And so that's what I want to do. Let me give you a quick illustration, and then we're going to jump into some of the research behind it. Imagine the first step is introducing a concept, right? So I like to start with a concept like clarity, especially with people from Spanish background, because, and I know this is an overgeneralization, but clarity is just always a great place to start, because I think culturally there's a little bit of a difference between how people speak from Spanish background speak than people from the United States. You guys, in general, I know I'm overgeneralization, but often you'll circle around a topic, and that's awesome. That's really, really great. It makes for beautiful stories. It makes for great conversation. But often when you're speaking to, when you're trying to communicate to someone from the United States, they're going to want something a little bit more simple, a little bit more direct, especially in emails. And so I start out by going into this idea of clarity. So that's the concept. We're going to go over a bunch of things in that. Maybe we'll spend a week or so talking about concepts in class, talking through things. We can talk about verbs, action verbs. We can talk about keeping your sentences to 1 or 2 ideas. There's so many different things that fall under this subheading of clarity. But after a week or so, we need to actually start writing. And their first draft might look a little bit like this. It's a house. It's not a bad house, you know, it's dimensional, but it's not complete by any means. And it's never going to be complete on the first try, never. That's why it's so important to rewrite. Rewrite is such a big process. And so the question is, how do you get from here to there? And the answer is effective feedback. That's your job. That's where you come in, and that's the part that's so difficult. And now this is a really nice picture, and you start with something, and then the next one's a little bit better. That's not always how it works out. I remember when I first started teaching, I've always done rewrites because that's a part of my pedagogy. That's what I really believe in. But sometimes the second draft would not come out better. Sometimes every once in a while, and this was really discouraging, every once in a while it'd be worse. And I would think, man, what did I do wrong? And as I was starting to research these concepts about, you know, how to give effective feedback, I started to realize that it's not a given that draft 2 is going to be better than draft 1. And hopefully you want to get to this stage, and once again, there's that idea of effective feedback, getting there. So let me blaze through some of these concepts. We're going to start with theory. What do researchers have to say about this topic? And then I'm going to show you some different tools that I use, because we are talking about giving feedback in the digital age. And that's a little bit different than it was a couple years ago. Even when I was in university, I started my undergraduate in 2011. So that wasn't that long ago, but every single one of my papers came back. It was a print paper, and my professor would write comments on the sides. And most of you guys probably had that exact same thing in your writing class back in the day. We're virtual now. We can't do that. And so there are a lot of tools out there that make that a little bit easier. And actually some tools that they might be better. They might be better than that original model of here's the paper, let me write stuff on the sides, because you can really get creative with some of these things. So I'm going to show you some of those things after we go through the theory concepts. So I'm going to look back and forth every once in a while because I have 2 screens up, and I have to catch myself up with my notes so that I don't go way off script and talk for 2 hours. But let me move here. All right. So let's start with theory. All right. Here's my advice. I'm going to boil it down to 5 different points. There's really way more than 5 points, but if you're taking notes, these are some things that you can write down. And then as we go through some specific examples, we'll return to these concepts. So if you're taking notes, these are the key concepts to write down. And this is the first one, and I put it first for a reason. Stick closely to your target concept or target concepts. And I put in parentheses, rubrics help. And we're going to talk about that second. First, let's talk a little bit about sticking closely to your target concepts. So most of you guys are teachers, right? Some of you guys are English teachers. Maybe some of you guys are in others. Do you ever, we'll assume that you're teaching English right now. Do you ever throw the entire book at your student the first day of class? Probably not, right? If you did, your student would be completely overwhelmed if you started to go into let's say you're having a conversational class with someone. Maybe they're a little bit more advanced. Maybe they're a B2 level, or maybe they're even a C1 level student. Do you correct every single mistake that they make? Probably not. And the answer, the reason why you don't do that is because students would get overwhelmed way too fast and discouraged. And so the exact same thing is true of writing. There is just way too much for you not to specialize on a few specific concepts. And whenever you assign something, you need to keep that in mind when you're actually grading. So let me give you a scenario. Say there's student A, and overall, student A turns in, I don't know, a C-level paper. It's okay, it checks off the boxes, but it's not great, it's not terrible, it's fine, okay? Student B turns in an A-level paper. Which one should get the higher grade? Well, the first thing you should think is well, of course, the one who turned in an A-level paper. But I would answer, it really depends. It really depends on the context. So if you're teaching something like clarity, let's say that student A really did a good job of implementing those specific concepts into their draft. And you're grading by a rubric based on clarity. Student A came into your class and was just naturally a pretty good writer. Maybe this person's a little bit more advanced. And so maybe they didn't actually input any of these ideas of clarity into their draft though, because they were confident in their writing. So with that new information, who should get the higher grade? I would argue that the first one should, because that was your goal whenever you started out teaching that assignment. This person put in the work, they put in the time to learn a concept, and that rubric, it keeps you honest. Because everything in your heart is gonna wanna say, I wanna give the higher grade to that student who technically has a better paper. But if you have that rubric on the side that says, okay, did they do this, it kind of puts a check on you, you know? It also helps you out a little bit because it can get overwhelming trying to assess everything. And so if you go into this knowing that I'm assessing clarity, then you're taking a little bit of that weight off of your shoulders. You're saying we're sticking to this concept, we're gonna move on from there. I'd also talk a little bit about giving detailed feedback. I have a quote over here. There was a survey that was put together by Aggies and Wilkinson's in 2014. And basically what the survey found was that students almost always, 94% of the time, they want really, really detailed feedback. And that may seem obvious, but another thing that this study found was that about 40% of the time did they actually feel like they were getting detailed feedback. And this is a problem because our students we think that we're giving our students what they want, but when you actually pull them, they're really struggling. When you give feedback, there was another one, actually this was another section of this Aggies and Wilkinson study. What they found was that students felt like you were putting in effort whenever you gave detailed feedback. And so even if, let's say you gave them a harsher grade than they were expecting, if you put in the time, they were willing to accept that grade a little bit more easily because of it. And so this shows that their efforts didn't go in vain. You never want to just drop a grade on someone and say, okay, you did this level paper, but they don't get any explanation about it. So we definitely need to be giving feedback, and we need to be explaining what we're doing, not just saying, fix this, fix this, fix this. It's really important to cushion constructive criticism by praising what students have done well. And this is something I did so badly when I first started out. I just didn't see the reason for it. I was like, they're here to learn. And so I would just wham, you know, all of the criticism all the way down. And my students were frustrated. And some of them were discouraged. And I know that because, you know, I would talk with them and I have good relationships with them, and they would say like, man, you can be a little bit harsh sometimes. We don't always feel like we're being harsh. And so it's important just to keep that in mind, that you have to keep student spirits up, and you need to praise them when they do things well. And that's also a teaching experience, because when you praise them for what they do well, they know I need to continue doing that. And sometimes we don't know what we do well. I remember a time when I wrote a paper back in my college days, and I almost took out a section of the paper, but I decided not to. And then I got my feedback back on it, and my teacher absolutely loved that section of the paper. I was this close to just crossing that out. I had no idea that that was the best part of my paper, but that teacher saw something that I didn't. And so when you praise students, you also tell them, hey, this is what you're doing well. Continue doing this. Don't take this out on your next draft. You need to expound on this. You don't need to take it out. Balance descriptive feedback with feed forward feedback. Now, this was a word, this was a new, conceptually it wasn't new, but many of you guys might not know the word feed forward. So feedback has the word back in it, obviously. And so that's you talking about the paper, the document, whatever it is that you just read. Feed forward is when you start to turn your attention forward towards the next assignments, the next things. And so while you do need to comment on what's in front of you, you also need to spend some time actually talking about how they can improve on the next draft. Some maybe large order things. And usually what I do, and I'm going to show you how I do it. Usually what I do is I'll make some notes in the paper, but then I'll record a video where I talk about some of those things. And that's how I get my feed forward feedback in there. And then finally, include multimedia feedback. There's a ton of research coming out about how important it is that we don't just write a bunch of comments. It's important to talk to your students, obviously not face-to-face, but through Zoom if you can, or through some other source. It's important to record yourself talking about the paper, and I'm going to show you some different things that I use to make that a little bit better. What I use is a screen sharing software that has my face down here at the bottom so they can see me, but they can also see their paper. And not only does that work better because they're hearing my voice, but they're also seeing their paper in real time. And it makes my job easier because it's way easier to talk about something in length than it is to write up paragraphs after paragraphs after paragraphs. And so I'm really excited to show you that in a little bit. But those are the 5 things. Again, here's all of here's a bunch of different citations, a bunch of different journal articles on some of these topics. Feel free to kind of click through them. Some of them are behind paywalls. And so if you're not affiliated with an institution, or if there's not someone, paying that check, you might only be able to see the abstract, but the abstract's still helpful. Some of them are not behind paywalls. I tried to find like a mixture of things so I could input them in. But let me show you how this looks in practice. So I'm actually going to open this up, but I need to stop sharing my screen so that I can share a different screen. All right, it's actually not letting me share another screen. I think we might be full. Can I have someone volunteer to leave the video segment, because right now we're full and I can't share my screen. So there we go. Perfect. All right, let me try now. We'll go with Chrome tab. Share. There we go. Can you see? Give me a thumbs up if you can see. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. All right, so this is a course that I designed in Canvas. And many of you guys might be familiar with Canvas. Some of you guys might absolutely hate Canvas at this point because you've been forced into it. If you do, I'm sorry, but I love Canvas because it gives you a lot more, especially when interacting with documents. It's a lot, there's a lot more there than there is in Google Docs. And so a lot of people start out with Google Docs, and that's fine because you can put little comments on the side of things. But when you're actually talking about interacting with the document, Canvas is far superior, in my opinion. I'm going to, I know this is small, so let me zoom in a little bit, and we're going to go down to, where are you? There it is. So this is the rhetorical summary. I wrote this beforehand. This isn't a specific student, but I wanted to show you a paper and go about my writing process. I've pre-written some comments so you don't just see me, typing up comments all the way through. But the first thing that I would do when I look at a document like this is to say nothing. Reserve your judgment. Judgment's the wrong word. Reserve your comments for when you have the full scope of things. And so we're not going to go in and give comments yet. First, what we're going to do is we're just going to read through the document from beginning to end. For time constraints, I'm not going to do that right now, but I just wanted to make sure I noted that, because when I jump straight into this, it's because I already have a large order understanding of things and I have a game plan for what I want to do. So let's take a look at this. Actually, you know what, before I do that, Dinah, I have a version of this that you can send a link out to. This might be too small for some people. And so if you could send that link out, they can open that up and
the summary.
Exactly, that one.
Okay.
All right. So that should be coming soon. Hopefully you can kind of see this right now. So there are a lot of cool things up here that you may or may not be familiar with. But I'm going to start out with this one, which is a highlighting tool. And I think note over here, these different colors are helpful. It took me a while to even figure out that those were there. So use those. What I do is I am trying to work towards actually making a video about things. And I know that if I don't color coordinate, then I'm going to forget what I actually want to talk about in my video. And so I choose a color for really important concepts. And we'll say that that color is orange. And we're going to read this first sentence. It says, "This is the story of a fisherman named Santiago who has not caught a fish in many days, but finally does. But when he's bringing it in, the fish is eaten by sharks." Wow. Mouthful of a sentence right there. It sounds like something's just kind of tumbled out. And what are we talking about right now? We're talking about clarity and we're talking about simplicity. And so what am I going to do? I'm immediately going to highlight that sentence because this is perfect. This is a great example of what I would want to comment on. And you can drop that over, put a comment in on the side. And because I'm trying to be positive, and there are some positive things here, I'm going to say this is a great place to start. And it really is, because if you're going to jump into a summary, you want to give kind of a brief overview of things. And then I might say something, is there any way that you can simplify your wording here? All right. I didn't mention this before in the research section, but there is some pretty good research. There's a little bit of disagreement, but the importance of actually wording things as questions sometimes, that softens the blow a little bit. And so if you can, right here, I'm saying I think you should do this, and it comes across a little bit softer in that sense. Like I said, some people prefer to just go straight at it. Personally, I'm going to put this into question form. It's not actually a question. I am asking them to simplify it in their next draft, but I'm just wording it this way. For the very, very first time, I know I'm going to say more about simplicity and clarity later in the document because I've read it, but for the very first time, often I will actually give them the rewrite to the sentence because I want to be really specific and give feedback that they can grasp onto. I'm not going to do this every time because really it needs to, they need to actually put the idea in practice. So if I'm doing all the work for them, that's not really, we're not accomplishing what we need to accomplish, but I'm going to do it the first time. And I've already rewritten it somewhere down here. And so I might write something like, here's an example. Drop that comment in there, and they can see exactly what I'm looking for. Again, I'm not going to do that every single time, but I like it in this case. We've also, I'm assuming at this point that I've talked a little bit about verbs. And one thing I really push when we do clarity is moving away from to be verbs. And so I also want to make a comment about that and say something like, note all of the to be verbs in this sentence. And they happen a lot. And in general, it's just it's better to have strong action verbs. And so that's really what I'm pushing the student to do, is just to note that. So the story is written. I might or might not, depending on if we've gone over passive voice earlier in the class, I may or may not point this out. But if I have, then I'll just write passive voice here, so on and so forth. The story is written in typical Hemingway style with short, terse prose. I might say, good point. So nothing more than that. Then they jump straight into a quote. And normally that's not a good idea, right? You always want to lead into your quotes when possible. But because we're not talking about that specifically, we're talking about something else, I'm going to ignore that for now. Maybe I take a note, I have a mental note here and say, we need to talk about this at some other time, but I'm not trying to throw everything at them right now. In fact, I'm not even really going that much into grammar at this point. I'm just talking about these concepts, these core concepts of clarity and simplicity. And so I'm actually going to skip over that. Note in particular Hemingway's use of the word and as a connector. The word works well because it is simple, reflecting the simplicity of the characters and places it describes. And so I might note double use of simplicity here, because we've talked a little bit about redundancy again in class, and that's something that I'm really trying to push at this point. How can you push it together? How can we make things more simple, more straight to the point? Rather than using sophisticated, flashy transitions that are good for sweeping the reader along, Hemingway chooses to use a simple, there's simple again, connector, which does a good job of illustrating the simplicity of the story. So now, at this point right here, I really want them to make the change themselves. So this needs to be clarified, simplified, or I'll put it into imperative form. Clarify, simplify, wording here. It's simple because I've already given them an example above. I'm going to expect them. Uh-oh, it's going crazy. Delete that annotation. All right, I'm going to expect them to do this themselves. And then finally, this last sentence, I think that this was a really genius move to make as a writer. I might simply cross this out. And so there's this tool right here, which is nice. It can look a little bit harsh, so let's make it green. There we go, less harsh. And I pre-wrote a comment down here. Often what I have is I have a comment bank because I have something like 65 students. And so a lot of the comments are repeated over and over again. And so what I'll do is I'll just pull this comment that I've pre-written about first-person pronouns and drop it in here, and that makes my life much easier. Not completely against, and so here's that comment. Let me fix all the crazy things I'm doing here real quick. I'm not really against first, there we go. So copy that and drop it over here. I'm not going to go through this whole document because that might take just a little bit too much time. But I did want to show you exactly what it looks like and some of the things that you can do. You can also use something like this where you draw on it. And so maybe you want to talk about this paragraph. You put a little bracket around. Now we're starting to get a bit cluttered, and you don't want things to look cluttered. And so I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to show you that that's a possibility. Let me delete that. And there's some text things up here. All right. So after a while, I'm going to work my way through this entire document. I want to make sure that I'm positive, but I also want to make sure that I'm noting things that need to be noted. Let me show you just a couple other things. I have a rubric created, and you guys probably can't see that very well. So I just want to note a couple things. In the rubric, I'm pretty much focused on this idea of clarity. There's a little bit about the rhetorical summary here at the bottom, but I have two sections about clarity, and I'll just go through and click exactly how they've done based on the really specific description in this rubric. But as I said before, my main goal is I want to work towards a video. So there's a couple ways that you can do this. Canvas gives you something right here. I don't know if you can see it. I'll zoom in. This button right here, if you click it, then you can record a video. I don't like this one as much as some other ones because right now they cannot see the screen while I'm talking. They're just going to see me and maybe some things in the background, but this is not screen recording software. And so I actually use something called Loom, and there's the there's what I have up here is the, what is it called, an add-on? The add-on that I have. Loom is free, and recently they've made the add-on to Loom free for educators. So if you can prove that you're an educator, they'll just ask you for your email. You can make as many videos through Loom as you'd like, which is really, really nice. That's saved me because I use it all of the time. And when I click on it, what it does is it brings up something that looks a little bit like this, and I can click start recording. I'm going to be here at the bottom, and they'll be able, when I start recording, let's just do it. Hopefully this doesn't mess anything up. There we go, there's the countdown. And I can record a video. What I'm really going to talk about are some of these key concepts, like clarity. I'm going to talk about things that they've done well, but I can really go into detail specifically about their draft at this point. Now they have a little bit of more of a personal connection with me. They can see me and I can talk about things. That's the idea. Let's go ahead and cancel that recording. When you finish your recording through Loom, it goes to a separate website, and all you have to do is you just have to, somewhere here in the comments, you'll just post a link to the video. They can click on that link, and there you go. I might also, if I have a lot of extra time, I might set up a meeting with my students so we can talk about it together. At this point, I've made enough notes that I think I can talk pretty, I can go into depth about things. If someone brings me a cold copy and they're like, what do you think of this? I haven't had time to gather my thoughts. So I like to have conversations after I've gone through the process of actually reading through it, making comments, because then I have a more clear understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish at that time. Let me show you one more thing, and then we're going to open up for questions. So when I go back to my course, this is actually a fun course. I really like it. It's for ESL students, and we read through The Old Man and the Sea. It's for pretty advanced ones, which is one of my favorite novels. And we learn vocabulary. We learn, we talk about it. It's just fun. It's a fun class. I love teaching it. But here on this, actually, you know what? I'm going to turn it into student view. So if I click student view here, I'm on the professor side. This is what it looks like to my students. I have to tell my students this because if I don't, then they're going to, they'll never know how to find the feedback. So to actually view feedback, you go into grades here, and they have to click on the assignment. When they click on the assignment, there's something called view feedback here. And at that point, they can open it up and they can see all of my comments on the side. I usually make a video with Loom showing them how to do this, because if I don't, like I said before, they're never going to find the feedback. It's just gonna, it's gonna be lost forever. They're gonna have no idea that I even wrote on there. And I have students like that every year that have no idea that I've put the comments into it, even though I've made videos, even though I've messaged them. That's fine. At the end of the semester, they have to rewrite, and they eventually do find the feedback. But just make sure, that's my one caveat. Make sure if you're using Canvas that you teach your students how to find it, because that's super important. I think, I'm trying to think if I've missed anything that I really wanted to go over, and the answer, I can't think of anything. So if you guys are okay with it, I think we should just open up for questions a little early, right? We're at about 35, so we can
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, there have been a few questions, not a lot, but there are some questions here on the chat. Would you like me to read them out, or do you want people to ask?
Let's wait a second for people to actually submit their questions. what I think, here, let me stop sharing my screen so we can see each other. All right. If anyone from the screen who can actually speak with me has a question, then maybe I'll field one of those. And then after that, we can jump into some of the questions on the chat sidebar. So yeah, let me just open up the questions. Whoever would like to ask, go ahead. And if nothing, then Dinah, you can read some off of the side. Hello. Can you hear me? Hi. I can hear you. Yes,
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi, I'm Liling from Malaysia. I have a very simple question. I'm actually teaching IELTS writing. So usually in my classes, I will have huge number of students. And in IELTS writing, we have 2 writing tasks for students to complete. I like your ideas of giving ideas online using all these colors. For me personally, I'm using Adobe Acrobat Reader to give comments, and also because of the color pictures and all the writing tools that I can use. But I'm just wondering, when you were showing us how to give feedbacks to students, were you using your own institutional LMS or Loom to give feedback to students? I mean, when you were doing demonstration earlier, were you using LMS or Loom or any other applications?
So I was using, if I understand your question correctly, I was using the free version of Canvas. There's a paid version, but there's also a free version. And so if you sign up, that's a good question. If you sign up for the free version, they'll give it to you, but you'll have limited space actually on Canvas to upload things. And so that's why I like to have the videos uploaded from a separate site, because if I upload them through Canvas, then I'm going to get full very quickly, and I won't be able to upload things on there. But I was using the software that's free. It's provided by Canvas. All you have to do is sign up through their sign up window. Just Google it, Canvas free for instructors, and they have all of that built into their software. You don't have to pull it from anywhere else.
All right, I think yeah, Canvas, you mean
C-A-N-V-A-S. Yeah.
Canvas. My second question is, how would you deal with a class with a huge number of students? Let's say, usually you will be given a very limited time to mark their essays, and then they are asking, students will be chasing you for feedback as well. I know they want feedback from teachers, but our challenge is we are dealing with a huge number of students. Like if you were to give these D2 feedback one by one, and then at the end of the day, we get run out.
Absolutely. How many? I have 65 students. How many students?
I have over 100 students.
Over 100?
And for three tasks, because this is not the assessment itself. Some students sometimes, they do practice, and they want teachers to give them feedback as well for continuous improvement as well. So how do you do with a huge amount of essays, and then you're using all this technology to give the two feedbacks as well, because it's not good for the eyes. I mean, I've gone through it, and then I find that it's not good for the eyes.
I've been there. So many essays, and then when you get to number 40, 45, you're like, I'm done. I'm not going to do any more of these ever again. What really helped me was making sure that I'm not doing the same type of feedback all of the time. Sometimes it helps to vary what you're doing. Before, when I first started, I would write extensive comments on all 65 of those students. Now what I do is I'll write less comments than before, but I'll make notes about, here's what I want to talk about in my video. And, just breaking up that process, having it a little bit different, like half the time I'm writing, half the time I'm actually talking about the essay, helps to not make it so, I don't know, repetitive over and over and over again. So I would say just the best, I don't have a good answer for you. The best answer I have is do that, and also build a comment bank, something on the side where you can copy and paste comments from it, just on basic topics that are going to come up, so you don't have to rewrite those every time. I've done it so much now that I have a huge comment bank, and I know that if I need to explain first person pronouns, I'm going to just copy paste,
Just copy
boom,
and paste.
there you go. So that kind of supplements things, and it gets easier over time. That's because you build up so many more comments, and you figure out new methods. So, but I'm there with you, man. It's hard. Yeah. Great question. Great question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
I do.
Yeah,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. You mentioned when you were using Loom that you would make a video to talk to your students. I'm wondering if your students can reply via Zoom. Yeah, they can.
Via Loom? Yes, they can. They can.
Yeah.
They can reply directly there. I've never had a student do it though. Usually, what they do is, so I'll put it into Canvas, the link there, and so it's just much more natural for right below that for them to reply to the comment on Canvas. So it's all in one place. And so every once in a while, I will have a student reply to feedback, and they'll almost always do it there. But they can do it through Loom. And I'm not sure if Loom would send you a notification. So that might be a glitch in the system. So you might tell them if you have a reply, do it through Canvas. Canvas will send you a notification. So yeah, I've never had it happen before. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Any questions from the chat, Dinah?
Yes, there's one at the beginning that said, what do you mean with C-level? Is it according to the US grading system, or what
Yeah.
are you referring to?
As I was saying that, I realized that there's different grading systems all around, and so I tried afterwards to say like that's kind of an average paper so that there was some context. But yeah, that was my mistake. C-level paper would be like a pretty average. A is what you're shooting for. B is good, and then C would be right around average in the US grading system. So yeah. Great. Any other questions?
I think you already answered this one. Can students reply in Loom? That's the one you just answered, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the one I answered.
Okay.
I have a question, Dominique.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
Yeah. So, how are your students reacting, or how did they react to your feedback? Like, what was it easy for them to like receive this kind of feedback, or what kind of process did you follow?
Yeah, there's a definite because I get we call them, oh, I'm forgetting, ISQs at the end of the semester, which is where students will rate you on a bunch of different things, and it's anonymous, so they feel the freedom to do it. And what I found over time is that I am a pretty tough grader because I know that they're going to have a chance to rewrite. And I tell them that at the beginning of the semester, like this will be tough at the beginning. When I give them that context, they're more receptive of a little bit harsher feedback because they know they get a second chance and a third chance. If you don't give those second or third chances, then that initial blow can be pretty devastating. If they get a C on a paper and they're used to always getting A's, then that just leads to frustration. And so I really push people to, if they can, do rewrites. If you have to cut an assignment at the end of the semester because you don't have the time to grade everything, do that. But the actual process of going in and working with feedback and changing things based on that feedback is super important. And so if I give a lot of comments and I give them a chance to rewrite, students are way more receptive of feedback, even if it's critical, than otherwise. So I generally get high ratings of students being happy with the course when I do those things right. And when I don't, then I'll get a couple like angry students like, "You're the worst, you're so hard, why are you so hard?" I'm sorry.
Now, I'm sure like they value, your feedback, because as everybody else here, It takes time, it takes a lot of effort to do this. So when you do it, they value that. So
Exactly.
I'm sure like
it shows that you value their work that they did because you've interacted with it. And that goes such a long way.
Yes.
You actually do that. So I've had multiple teachers in my undergrad experience who gave me no feedback. They would just give a grade on the paper and then there it is. And I am strongly, strongly opposed to that. If you can avoid that when possible, don't do that. I understand we get overwhelmed, and so no judgment. But if you can avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, or I was thinking when Ling Ling asked the question, sometimes when you get to work with many students, definitely you also have to work on yourself first, and then maybe just like go step by step, because it's definitely hard to grade 100 papers, and it's not only one paper, right? I mean, if you work throughout a term or a semester, it gets like a lot.
Many assignments throughout the semester, so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for what you do, Dominic. I think
I appreciate it.
You're doing something great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions?
Well, it says here, is it possible to share the rubric and the comment bank? I don't know exactly what Daniel is referring to, but.
Yeah, so I talked about the rubric that I used. I kind of threw it together for this. Let me. Daniel, yes, I can share both of those things with you. We've met, but I've met Daniel, and so if you guys reach out to me, maybe in the networking, or you can just send me a request. I'll be here in the conference for this whole time. If you want those things, then just shoot me a message directly, and I'll drop a link.
Another one, what do you think about using L1 to give feedback to low-level learners?
L1. I'm not familiar with L1. Can someone help me out here?
Would that be
Native
basic?
language, Spanish, in our case.
L1 is, I think it's the
mother
language
tongue.
one, the first language.
Yeah, first language, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So for early beginners, understand that I'm not talking as an expert here. This is an opinion, absolutely an opinion. Haven't researched this, and so take it with 2 grains of salt at the most, maybe 1. But I would say at very early language for early language beginners, I do use, even in my classes when we do verbal, when I'm speaking with students, I'll use a little bit of the native language. When students when they're lost, when it's apparent. I try to stay as much in the target language as possible, because even if they don't understand everything, they're getting that comprehensible input, which is so important. And so I would say it's probably similar in the writing process. But all of the people I've taught, Spanish speakers, have usually been people who are already pretty fluent in the language. They're probably B2 or C level students. And so I haven't had that experience yet, because I would probably focus more on speaking at that point.
One more question. I don't know how many more questions we can do, but it says here, what would be the average time to spend in class for feedback? For example, when students have more questions about your notes.
So the question is how much in-class time would you actually spend on going through feedback?
I think that's what it refers to.
Most of the time, I do most of my feedback out of class. In class, we're going to go over concepts, and outside of class, I have all of these tools available so I can give them feedback. The reason for that is if there's a bunch of people here together, I don't want to be putting someone's paper up here and blitzing it in front of everyone. That can be a little bit, I don't know, it's just, that's difficult for a student. Unless they've specifically said, you can do this, I want this, then there's been a couple cases where we've actually gone through student papers in class. But for the most part, my feedback, my individualized feedback, happens outside of class, and we go over concepts inside of class, more in theory. You think was that the tenor of the question?
I think so.
Okay.
And well, there's
I have
something
a
that you already
question.
explained. Oh, yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. What do you think about peer feedback? Like having feedback from each other?
Yeah, so the reason I did not talk about peer feedback in here is because the literature is super split. There's 100 studies and 50 say it's great and 50 say it's not so great. I think peer feedback can be useful, especially when there's some directives and there's very clear there's a clear instruction about how this feedback should happen. You have to have a conversation about peer feedback before peer feedback, or else students are just going to say, hey, great job, you did a nice job here, I really liked what you did, check. And so if I ever do peer feedback, and I do sometimes in my classrooms, I have an entire session where we talk about here's what effective feedback looks like. You have to teach people how to give feedback before just throwing them into the fire. You have to give them permission to say, don't be mean to each other, but like, you're trying to help each other. You're on the same page here. And so be honest and say, I don't really like this as much. Like, maybe this can be reworded here. Give real feedback and, give them the time to do it. And if you do it right, it can be useful. In my opinion, like I said before, there's a split among scholars, among experts about peer feedback. Any other questions? All right.
There's one person who is preparing herself to be a teacher. So she wants to double check. And she's saying you have to be a little sweet when you speak. Say our reasons when they get a grade that you give them. That's what you said.
Yeah, those are two of the concepts that I gave. Be
polite, somebody says.
Be polite, but not just for the sake of being polite. I think people can sniff out when you're not being honest, when you're just saying things to say things. So find things that are genuinely done well, and that's a skill that you can develop. Even with papers that are really, really rough, there's always a couple things that you can say, okay, this is nice. We can build off this. And so, build that skill, you'll get better at it. But don't be, I guess the thing I don't want you to take away is don't be dishonest. If you try to be honest, try to find something that you really think was done well. And yeah.
And one more, is it possible to do a feedback during the class? I mean, we can choose a text and do it during class.
Yeah, so I would say as long as it's not from one of the students within the class, then I do that all the time. There's the idea of scaffolding. Many of you guys probably know this. The idea of scaffolding is really important in writing. And basically how it works is, imagine there's two triangles kind of beside each other, and one's, it's so hard to explain without a picture. I'm gonna leave that one because it's, but the idea of scaffolding is that at the very beginning of a concept, it's mostly the instructor doing the work. At some point, you should move up to something in the middle where the professor is doing half of the work and the students are doing the other half of the work. And then finally, at the end of the scaffolding model is where the student's doing most of the work and you're doing a little bit of the work. And so that model is really important. So at the beginning, you're going to be doing all the feedback, you're going to be doing all the teaching, all of the concepts, and it's absolutely a great idea to bring in a paper in class and actually go through and say, here's the comments I would do, here's how I'd fix these things, because that's the beginning of the scaffolding model. You're going to be talking the whole time, and then you branch that over to students, and maybe you have them actually in class talk through something, because it's just, it's a great idea.
Well, I don't know how many minutes we have, Dominique. Already.
This ends at 12:30, correct? Or 11:30 Peruvian time.
Yeah, so we have 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, but if there are no questions, then I think we can end 5 minutes early, right?
Yeah, There's one question that has been asked several times. What do you think of Flipgrid to give feedback?
Say the concept again.
Flipgrid. Have you ever tried Flipgrid?
I've never tried Flipgrid. Is it like automated feedback?
Well, you can make videos there.
But
you have already talked about Loom, so I think
videos,
you prefer to use Loom, right?
Yeah, that's just the one that I use. So there are many others that allow you. I like to have the text visible, so that I can actually show them while I'm speaking about things. So I don't know if Flipgrid does that, but I'm very much in favor of actually you're communicating with your voice. And so if video system, I approve.
They're giving you the suggestion that you should try Flipgrid.
All right, I'm gonna write that down.
A lot of teachers love it.
Over on my notes here.
Okay.
Flipgrid. It's all right.
Everybody's very thankful. They love your speech here, so their explanations. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you guys so
you.
much. It was great to get to see some of your faces, and it looks like there are 133 people watching, which is terrifying. But I'm glad there was. I'm glad only 9 of you guys or 10 of you guys are visible, because that would scare me to death if there's 132. All right. I hope to meet some of you guys. I'll be around in networking or different events if you're speaking. But this was wonderful. This was fantastic. I loved it. Every second of it. Thank you guys. I'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.